Every single cooler company we talk to does not understand how Thermalright can do the prices they do. The only thing I can come up with is the factory relationship, but the point is that it's been a serious challenge for people to compete on price. So Montech says they're trying to basically combine competing on price, i.e. with Thermalright, and kind of replacing DeepCool's spot in the market. So DeepCool, before they got kicked out of America, which is a hell of a thing to put on your resume, they really sort of started dominating in the cooler market before Thermalright came in and kicked their ass on price. And where DeepCool continued to compete was in build quality. So Montech's looking at that, and they want to take that part of the market. Montech specifically said to us that the objective is to compete sort of with Thermalright, which is everybody's objective. Before that, this video is brought to you by the Thermaltake TR100 Portable Mini-ITX case. The TR100 case has a mesh ventilated front panel, heavily perforated side and top panels, and claims to support up to 280mm liquid coolers and large GPUs up to 360mm long and 70mm thick. It even has an optional suitcase with cutouts for the system, a mouse, keyboard, and monitor for transport. The Thermaltake TR100 Mini-ITX case targets portable, smaller form factor PC building while maintaining compatibility for relatively large components. Learn more at the link in the description below. The biggest thing with this cooler, when I asked the question of why should I care about this, the fan's 28mm, which will help with pressure, should help with performance. So we'll talk through that today. Pricing on the single tower NX400 non-ARGB, so that'd be this one here that's spinning, is supposed to be $26, which you're starting to get granular. I think it was technically $25.90, is that right? It's $25.90. When you're down to like the 10-cent mark, that's how you know there is zero margin left in the product. So anyway, that'll be interesting to talk about, especially as Thermalright gets some competition. All right, so we'll start with the coolers today. This is what I'm most interested in. So this is a two-post mount. It has the C-shaped bracket for the actual board. There's no offset mounting for AM5. This is a single tower cooler. One thing I'm curious about is how much an offset mount might or might not matter for the 4 heat pipe approach. But basically, this is supposed to be the sort of as cheap as possible, but still actually kind of good cooler from Montech, which is a very fiercely fought over category right now, which is a good thing. It's the one that probably needs the most competition because people who are more price sensitive need the most options to make sure it stays price competitive. So anyway, this fan is the difference here. So it's a 28mm thick fan. Typically the fans are 25. This has been trending up. So Fantex has been they've been playing around with 30mm fans. Haven, we just showed, is playing around with 40mm fans and a 52. And then Height was with the thick Q60 series and Q80s. They were playing around with also larger fans. The point for all of that is to increase the static pressure performance. So specifically when you put a fan onto a fin stack like this, you're instantly introducing a ton of resistance behind it. It's the nature of a heat sink, as opposed to a fan on the front of a case where it's basically open air and the only thing it's fighting is whatever's in front of it to filter the dust and whatever else, like glass or something. So this requires more pressure. That's why you're seeing more of these larger fans. And as the cost starts to come down for them, because more people make them, then we're going to see more prevalence of the larger fans. So yeah, that's kind of what they're going for. I asked Montech if they've done any A/B testing for a 25 versus a 28 with otherwise as like for like as possible fans on these, and they said they have. The NX400, I think it was, has about a 1 to 2 degree difference, meaning going to the 25, they got 1 to 2 degrees warmer, which makes sense. And it's also, by the way, a very large difference for an air cooler. They're going for, like I said, $26 on the non-RGB, about $30 on ARGB. The NX600 is a 6 heat pipe version of what we're talking about, and this one currently has a TBD price. Sounds like it's maybe going to be in that $40 to $50 range, though, from what we've heard. It is also 30mm thick fans, but there's 2 of them. And then otherwise, it's a two-tower approach to the cooler. They're still using the plastic caps here, like you find on the NX400 as well. And then for the cold plate, that has also changed. So this goes to an actual like enclosed, nickel-plated copper base plate with the 6 heat pipes going through it. So those are the coolers. But one of the things that some of you who haven't been around long enough might not realize is that Montech actually, I think, gets credit for one of my best quotes of all time, which was the Molex centipede. later recycled it for CyberPower twice.
All 6 fans are daisy chained together out of the box in true Molex Centipede fashion.
But the Molex Centipede is gone. The Molex Centipede in the X3, which was a super budget focused case at the time, is basically just a whole bunch of daisy chained Molex connectors for the fans. So this is the X5. It's supposed to kind of replace that series. And the pricing for these is $75 for the X5 and then X5M, which is smaller, Micro-ATX target. That's $60. So pricing's gone up a little bit from what Montech wanted to target as a result of cost increase, potential tariffs, things like that. The tariffs, just a quick aside here, but there's a 90-day pause on some of them, but not everything. And so that is still going to affect pricing at Computex this week. But anyway, the case itself, so the X5 has this wavy mesh front panel. They're experimenting with doing basically a painted on or a sticker type of carbon fiber thing. So they kind of did that with the wood veneer on one of the other ones in the past. It is not real carbon fiber, and if you want a $75 case, it probably shouldn't be anyway. Internally, so for the non-MATX version, we're going for 3 140 mil fans included and 1 120 for the rear. So the reason the X series was always interesting, like the X3, was specifically for the amount of fans at the price. And that is where, actually, I think we first started paying attention to Montech was those like super cheap cases with a lot of fans. They tended to do overall pretty well thermally, despite back then being like cheaper quality fans overall. So hopefully they're able to fight there again, because right now the 70, like below $80 case market is largely dead. There are some options out there, but like the 4000D, that was supposed to be a $80-ish case. And that was kind of the last major one that was really successful. It's just all gotten more expensive. So see a $75 case is nice to see, especially if it's not made out of scrap metal. For the rest of it, so backside here on the white variants of the case, they have actually colored all the wires, which is something I try to pay attention to for these cheaper cases. So they did go for white coloring on the cabling. The plastics are a little bit different coloring. This is something we've talked about in the past, but matching white is really difficult apparently, where between metal, plastics, rubbers, and all the different materials, it's, from what I understand, not easy, but that's the only kind of, that Patrick and I would immediately look at in a review. It's just, at a $75 case, not as big of a deal as it would be otherwise. Then up here, there's an option to mount 120s. There's not a ton of room with this one against the power supply. There's a little bit of room with this one to pull through the side here. So it might do a little bit, not a whole lot. It would help the GPU a little bit though. Integrated for the GPU support here. And otherwise, there's not like a whole lot to talk about with these cases. They're very simple, they're cheap. That's kind of what they're supposed to be. All right, let's move over to this one. So this is called the Sky case. The only thing that's really like jumping out at me is interesting. So they have a canted tray for the 2 fans. These are reverse blade fans, they're intake. And one of the questions Montech was asking us is, if we include a fan config like this one, the white case, basically with 3, do we do the 2 on the side or the 2 on the bottom? The 2 on the side by default will pump more air into the case and just generally cool the GPU and the CPU evenly. If you have a CPU tower cooler or something, 2 on the bottom is going to be better for the GPU if they're flipped like this in the back, which they can be. So that's what's interesting about the case. When I asked, if it's better with the fans in the back, which it would be, why not just only ship it that way? Why even give the option other than modularity is nice? The answer is that power supply shroud kind of cuts across what is otherwise a nice angled decline on the glass front. So you get a shot from the front of that, and you'll see the square edge against the angle. And this is currently shorting through. If you've ever wondered if either static electricity or just shorting to ground is the thing it is. So large ventilated holes on the side panel in both locations. What I would like to see, this is not final yet, the case isn't done, so they're still working on it, but one thing I'd like to see is some refinement to these magnetic filters, where currently the, well, if we just get a close-up shot here, currently you can see there's a whole lot of metal ending up in each of these hexagons, and if they can punch out larger holes or make the actual ventilation on the side a finer mesh and get rid of the dust filter or something like that, that's going to help a lot with thermal performance and letting air through. But anyway, that's still being worked on. I guess this is worth talking about. So This panel, unlike the normal pogo pins we see in case reviews, these are supposed to be a little more resilient. So from what Montech was saying, the choice was just to reduce the risk of breaking, and then it connects down here. So that's going to be the actual sort of receptacle for it. And that'll power the light strip, which is located along this edge. And under that, there's some mesh ventilation. Overall, I mean, I have critiques of all of these, but they're not done, so it's hard to get into too much detail. The biggest one I think I have for this case is just, like I was saying earlier, so there's side panel ventilation, but then also on the bottom. So when the fans are in this orientation, the drive cages down there end up kind of blocking potential intake from the bottom, but they're also just not really bringing anything from the bottom anyway, because the distance here is like on a scale of millimeters, so there's not a lot of room to breathe from this side. So these fans are really only pulling air through whatever ventilation they have here and on the side and then on the rear side, and there's not a whole lot of possibility of pulling through the bottom. I think the performance might be better if it could come in through the bottom. It just becomes a form factor question, but maybe we'll look at that in the testing. Now, the last thing for this case, so pricing, it's supposed to be $80 for the mesh fronted version, and then $100 for the glass, and then 3 fans included with it, which are the ones that you see in this model already. Over here, so this we already reviewed. There's a review on the channel. The only difference well, there's a couple structure differences, but the big difference is just this piece of glass here. So that's really the only thing worth mentioning. Otherwise, you can check out our review for the rest. There's some small improvements otherwise. The 10, so this kind of reminded me in some ways of the Lian Li Mini-ITX. I think it was the 011 Mini, they called it, where this can be rotated and modified into 3 different configurations. So one of them is ITX, which is built over here. One of them is like the default, which is this one, and then the third one flips. And then you basically pull the whole case apart and swap around all the panels. I'm told it takes 5 to 10 minutes to do it. So you swap everything, and it basically just sort of inverts some of the parts. This is an excellent side panel, just one giant piece of mesh. And then on the other side, we have another big giant piece of mesh. And that one is mated up against the GPU, which is exactly what they need to do, because a glass panel here with the amount of depth there is on this, it would really suffocate the card. So going mesh on this side is a must, in my opinion. They've done that, and that's a good thing. Now, the challenges with this kind of layout is a flow-through design is going to dump heat into basically the power supply fan, which is fine. The power supplies can take it. The question becomes, where does the air go after that? So InWin, we talked to them about this a couple years ago, but one thing that Montech maybe might want to do is pull down a wall here under that power supply where it's connecting at the bottom to block recirculation, because currently the power supply is exhausting down. So if air goes in through the flow through into the fan, comes out down at the bottom, if this fan is the highest pressure thing, it's going to pull that hot air back in. So one of the things Montech can do is flip it so they can rotate the whole power supply and push the air up, which would work out, I think, much better, because then it goes out the fan, and these radiators are going to be better equipped to handle it, and the fan's pulling, so it's going to pull it away from the GPU. So anyway, that's kind of the points we're looking at there. But otherwise, it's like an all-mesh box, which is kind of hard to complain about. It is about 27 or so liters external, counting the feet. ITX is an option. They're calling that configuration the i3, and then MATX is the other. So it's Micro-ATX is M1 and M2, just depending on if it's flipped or not. And then this supposed to start at $90. It's not finalized yet. Moving on to the last couple here. So the Kin 15 and Kin 45 are just continuations of the existing Kin series. They have the 95 and the 65. We've reviewed the 65 somewhat recently, the last year or so. And still a curved glass approach to the front. It's very familiar overall. I mean, I don't know. I don't really have a lot to say about this case at this point. It's been something Montech's been doing for a while. So the bottom fans, really the only thing I'll point out, where those are sunken into the bottom, which means they're pretty close to the floor. There's no intake on this side. So you see that panel just goes all the way down. So the intake's going to come in primarily or almost entirely from that hole in the side there. And so slanting a little bit should help with that, but it still kind of still kind of boxed in. All right, so the last thing on the Kin 15, they're going for 3x120s and 140 fan at $110. Empty, they're saying $90. And then moving on to the Air 2000. So we've got this one with the glass front, and then the white one to the left, which is a mesh front. But we're going to start with the glass front here. So this case has a panel on the side. It's basically a digital display for fan speed, but it has control capability too. So they're going for 10% increments in control with each button press, or default into motherboard control. So motherboard control will just follow whatever the motherboard curve is for the fan, whereas the 10% toggles, you'd see it just went down from 1560 to like 1440 or something, and then it's got this basically like bars of service type of thing for progression on the RPM with each 10% press. So that's something they're doing in the panel. The way it actually looks, this is the white one obviously, it's just one big PCB here. So that's got the display on it, and then another PCB, and then there's a wire that runs to the back where the fan hub is. So upsides of this approach, there's no software required. This has been done before by a couple companies. It is not that common though. And I mean, DeepCool did it at one point, EVGA on the DG87, but that case sucked. And then I forget, Montech had one at some point last year actually. So anyway, it's been done before. Being able to control fan speed externally is always a nice feature. I like that, especially if it doesn't require software. But it kind of, up to you if you want on the side of your case like that. Pricing for these is supposed to be $110, and that is with the screen. They're gonna have a screenless variant that's just mesh down there, and then it's all 140s, and it's 4 of them. So that's the case layout for the filter here. So one of the things I was telling Montech is that I do actually like the way this design ends up looking, where in terms of doing branding without being too on the nose obnoxious, they've got their Illuminati triangles integrated in there, and then their patented actually dust filter removal system. For the empty one, just to look at it a little easier, so this is the mesh variant. This is a 70% hole porosity. We're talking about how Montech had sent us a bunch of different hole porosity panels for our fan tester testing that we did a couple months ago, which was an awesome test. This is a step up from that in that it's just a giant hole, but the thickness of the steel here is such that it doesn't end up being flimsy like the 60-something% one we showed in the fan tester video. So it is actually pretty rigid, which is a good thing. Otherwise, the side here, this is all pretty standard stuff. So power supply shroud that's ventilated. It's got perforations in the top. The bottom is perforated, but it's across the entire case. So this is actually kind of cool where you'd expect it to be perforated where the power supply fan goes, but up here it's also punctured. And then even the top of this drive cage, small attention to detail stuff, is punctured. I mean, how much does it really matter at this point? Once you're all the way up here, you're pulling through like multiple layers. Not a whole lot, but it is good to see, because just like punching a bunch of holes in the drive cage is really only going to help things. So especially if there's no drive in there to block the air anyway. For the rest, internally, pretty standard layout. So I mean, rubber grommets for cable routing, all that stuff. Not a whole lot to point out specifically in the Air 2000, other than the screen and trying to hit the 4-fan layout at a cheaper price point, so in the low hundreds. So that'll definitely go through our testing, and I would expect thermally it should be one of the more interesting ones, especially the mesh-fronted version of it. So anyway, I think that's pretty much it for our coverage of the Montech stuff at Computex. They have a lot. There's a few things we didn't really talk about. So they've got liquid coolers, they have power supplies, but I think that's good for now for this coverage. We'll have reviews of the cases as they come out. A lot of these are going to be end of this year or early next year. So several of them were like Q1, Q2, maybe next year. So they're pushing pretty far into the future for launch targets. But immediate future X5 is on our list, especially for the pricing. And then the NX 400 and 600 coolers are on the list. Not only because I can remember the names, because it's 4 heat pipes and 6 heat pipes, but also because the price competition should be interesting, especially giving Thermalright more of a run for their money. So that's it for this one. Thanks for watching. As always, subscribe for more. Go to store.gamersnexus.net or patreon.com/gamersnexus to support us directly, and we'll see you all next time.